Hey guys, Kiwi here. In this video, I'll be discussing how exactly Rick Grimes got his mojo back during Season 7A, leading up to what we can expect from him during Season 7B. We'll also be grabbing examples from the comics and comparing them to the show, so warning of spoilers for everything in the comics and the show up to the most recent episode, 708. So as I'm sure most of you know, after the double death in the Season 7 premiere, along with Carl almost losing his right hand, Rick was left completely broken. Although he doesn't stay this way forever, it does take him all the way until the end of Season 7A for Rick to finally realize that he needs to rise up against the Saviors in order to overthrow Negan and live freely. And so I'd like to jump more into more of the specifics of how Rick came to this realization, along with how it differs from the comics. Alright, so in the show, Rick Grimes completely bends over head over heels for Negan just to keep the peace, attempting to do whatever he can to ensure no one else dies. He's sick and tired of losing people left and right, and after the loss of Glenn and Abraham, he just can't stand the thought of it happening ever again, or even something worse. What he comes to understand by the end of the season is that although war will result in casualties, it's better to fight Negan's army for freedom than to continue living a crappy life repressed and constantly harassed by the Saviors. There are a lot of different aspects here that finally help Rick change his point of view on the situation, so let me help summarize them a little bit. First off, we have Aaron and his insights on the world around him, resulting in Rick actually rethinking his current position as Alexandria's leader and what to do with it. I actually have a full video on my channel dissecting Aaron and Rick, but essentially Aaron sticks beside Rick in his decisions while at the same time understanding where everyone else is coming from. This helps Rick better listen to Michonne later in the episode when she goes to talk to him in that cell that Morgan had built a season prior. Here Michonne finally breaks through to Rick as they comfort each other on how they feel about it all and what they want to do about their lives moving forward. This is why Rick tells Maggie that he couldn't hear what she was saying beforehand, but he can now.
You were right from the start. You told us to get ready to fight. I didn't listen, I couldn't. I can now.
We'll get back to that later on in the video, but right now I'd like to focus on how Alexandria was actually attacked by a group of saviors in the comics at the same time that Rick and group were ambushed by Negan on the road. But unlike on the road, the survivors actually won this battle back home defending Alexandria, resulting in them capturing Dwight alive. When Rick returns, Andrea reveals this to him only to have him tell her that they need to release him. This shocks everyone, especially Andrea, as people don't want to listen to the idea that they are defeated and need to accept it, especially the people that just defended Alexandria and won. Rick speaks to his fellow survivors, giving a speech about facing the fact that they need to completely surrender to Negan and live under his rules, and then one at a time he also talks to Andrea, Michonne, and Carl about it, convincing them all that this is the correct route to go, and that this is what he truly believes in. This all sounds relatively similar to the show, but the difference I'm trying to build up here is the fact that Rick is actually lying to everyone in the comics. Although he actually believes all of this in the show, he doesn't in the comics, and he's only pretending to. They briefly tease this idea at the end of issue 102. While they release Dwight from Alexandria, Rick secretly tells Jesus to follow Dwight back to his camp, finding out where they live, giving them the first upper hand that they need in order to fight back. Considering Negan first arrives in issue 100, we see defiance from Rick very early on in the comics, as he begins secretly plotting against Negan from the very beginning. And unlike in the comics, since Rick loses his mojo completely in the show, it was actually Sasha who told Jesus to find out where the sanctuary is. Now Rick ends up confessing his true intentions to Andrea during issue 103, as they're dating in the comics, and she was actually packing up and moving out due to disgust in Rick's decisions. If you've watched my breakdown on Spencer Monroe, then you'll know that Andrea ended her fling with him due to him being such a coward, and instead became attracted to Rick Grimes due to how courageous he is. Rick assuring Andrea of his secret intentions to fight back against Negan in issue 103 actually occurs during the time span of episode 704's service, as this is when Negan makes his first visit to Alexandria. This actually brings us to when Carl sneaks into the sanctuary in an attempt to assassinate Negan. While in the show, Rick isn't aware of Carl leaving Alexandria at all until he's already back. In the comics, Carl actually goes missing for a few days. Rick assumes that Negan took him, but doesn't know for sure, acting dumb in the meantime so he doesn't rile up the people of Alexandria. While everyone thought that Rick was out searching for Carl each and every day, he's actually been out searching for the sanctuary, trying to find Negan himself, as he was too eager to wait for Jesus to come back with Carl missing and everything. Either way, Carl gets returned to Rick with another small altercation with Negan, leaving Rick in a deep hole, just like how Negan describes in the TV show after Spencer's gutting during 708.
And however much you scavenged, it's not good enough, because you're still in serious hole after today.
Once Carl is back at Alexandria with everyone else in issue 107, Jesus decides it's time to introduce Rick to King Ezekiel, which is actually the first time that we ever see Ezekiel in the comics. In the show, however, watching Rick meet Ezekiel will not be our first introduction to him along with the kingdom, as we've already learned about them from Morgan and Carol in episode 702. The reason why they remixed this was because Rick wasn't ready to meet Ezekiel in the show as early as he was in the comics, as Jesus needed to know that Rick was fully on board to fight against the Saviors and was able to organize a defense. This, of course, left the show to introduce King Ezekiel with different characters, allowing us to at least get used to them a little bit before the beginning of March to War. This actually jumps into the topic of my next video, which will focus more on Dwight and how he will come into play here during Season 7B, along with the answer to the question of who exactly helped Daryl escape from the sanctuary. So be sure to look forward to that in the future, but for now, let's jump into the final topic of today's video, which includes Rick marching to the hilltop and speaking to Gregory about Negan. So real quick, let's jump back to episode 701 as we look at the final scene between our main survivors. Although Maggie insists on retaliating, Rick tries explaining to her about how there's no way to fight back against Negan's army of saviors.
We need to get you to the hilltop.
You need to go get ready
For what?
to fight them.
They have Daryl. They have an army. We would die, all of us.
In the comics, Maggie actually attacks Rick out of rage over Glenn's death, but either way they all come to their senses and they agree on bringing Maggie to the hilltop along with their fallen friends. In the show, Sasha's the only one to bring Maggie to the hilltop, while in the comics, everyone including Rick actually goes along with her. And so this is where one of the scenes that we've been getting teased about for Season 7B comes into play. The scene in question involves Rick and group talking to Gregory inside the Barrington house at the hilltop, which actually occurs quite differently in the comics. And so the scene that we'll be seeing in the show is actually a combination of 2 or 3 separate scenes from the comics, and let me explain why. So in the comics, after they bring Maggie to the hilltop along with Glenn's body, Rick yells at Gregory for misinforming them on Negan and his army. All Gregory cares about during all of this was whether or not he was sold out to Negan for conspiring against him with Alexandria, really showing what his true priorities are. This helps Rick realize Gregory's true colors and the fact that he is completely useless and not to be trusted. The other half of this conversation will most likely come from issues 109 and 111, as Jesus confronts Gregory himself on the matter, putting him in his place. This has already kind of been shown by Jesus taking charge at the end of episode 705, but I could see it also being combined into the show even more to further show Gregory's shady personality and a lack of responsibility as a leader. What do you guys think about all of this, and are you hyped to finally see Rick Grimes back in action? I know I'm super excited to kick off Season 7B as our characters form alliances between each other and finally get the retribution and freedom they deserve. If you've enjoyed anything I've said today, feel free to hit the thumbs up button, as it honestly helps me out a lot, along with showing me that you guys enjoy watching my content just as much as I enjoy making it. And if you're new here, consider subscribing for future Walking Dead content, but that's pretty much it guys. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.